challenging to walk.
Hello, hello, hello. Great evening, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Local Governance and Community Development series here on the Serenity Resource Connector. Whether you're joining us live or you're watching the replay, as always, it is a pleasure to have you here. And we are going to be zoning in on disaster preparedness on this episode. And what better time to do so than in the midst of the hurricane season here in the Caribbean? And already we're seeing some really active systems out there, and we are just praying for the best. And we are going to have our guests from the Clarendon Municipal Corporation in the person of Eleanor Coombs-Waite, the Parish Disaster Coordinator, share with us her roles, what has been happening in Clarendon in terms of preparation, and some tips. We're definitely going to be leaving you with some tips for preparing for this season. So let's make welcome Lady Coombs-Waite. Welcome to the Serenity Resource Connector space.
Good evening, Miss Witter, and good evening to your viewers. Thanks for having me.
Great. It is a pleasure to have you here. And as always, we like to set the foundation before we go into the crux of the discussion. So, Parish Disaster Coordinator, what is your primary role as the Parish Disaster Coordinator?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Now, under the supervision of the Chief Executive Officer of the local authority, my main responsibility is that of coordinating disaster risk management activities. So I deal with awareness, prevention, response, recovery, mitigation activities within the parish. I work closely with the ODPEM, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, and of course the ministry responsible for disaster management, which is the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. Some of my duties include being an advisor to the Parish Disaster Committee, being a liaison, as I said earlier, with the ODPEM and the other membership of the Parish Disaster Committee, ensure that preparedness programs are done, some activities and similar activities are carried out in the parish, whether they be drills, inspections, trainings, activities of that kind. Of course, this is done in collaboration with other entities. Of course, I am a liaison to the community groups, the community disaster risk management groups on disaster risk management activities. I also responsible for the activation and the deactivation on the advice of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, and advise the chairman of the Disaster Committee of the deactivation of the parish emergency operations, and provide situational reports accordingly. I do shelter and shelter management in terms of their inspections, in terms of their training, manage relief stores, and of course deal with mitigation projects in the parish, identify vulnerable locations in the parish, and of course, last but not least, ensure that the subcommittees of the disaster committee are operational. So those are pretty much some of the duties that I do.
Wow. That's a full plate. And then some. All right. So we are going to get into some more elaboration on those roles that you just identified there. But before we do so, let's acknowledge our regular viewer here, live viewer here on the Serenity Resource Connector in the person of Anne-Marie Golden McLegon, and she's greeting you, Mrs. Coombs-Waite
Hi,
from
Anne-Marie.
Ville Park. All right. And Anne-Marie, happens to be celebrating her birthday tomorrow, the
Happy
26th
birthday.
of August, which also happens to be the 1 year anniversary of the Serenity Resource Connector program. So,
Hey, there.
happy birthday when it comes, Anne Marie. All right, we'll be celebrating together as I celebrate the 1 year mark for this program. It's been quite a journey, enjoyable one. All right, so let's get into the whole matter of the disaster management framework, because you mentioned ODPEM before, which is that super agency that's responsible for disaster management in general. But of course, there are other areas before it gets to the parish, and not just parish, but down to the community, right?
Yeah.
So let's go through the framework.
All right,
Take
not
us
a
through
problem.
the framework. Let's take it from the beginning. All right.
All right, so it is important. It's important to know that disaster risk management is not a one-man band. It deals with multi-agency approach. So everybody is and has to be involved, right? So it deals with the coordination and the combination of responses. It deals with ensuring that we use our resources within the parish um, properly, and of course, use combine these expertise so that we can have a good function. Um, as I said earlier, it's not a one-man band, so it requires the support of everyone, public, private sector, donor groups, voluntary agencies, NGOs. So we talk about persons or groups like the Red Cross Salvation Army, the public entities such as the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, SBC, the health authorities, everybody. You and me, the community members, everyone.
All right. So let's get to the framework.
All right, so in Jamaica, disaster risk management framework is on 4 levels. Some schools you will see three. The national, and of course, the national is headed by the Honorable Prime Minister. He heads the Disaster Risk Management Council, which you will see more of or hear more of later on. Then you have the regional, which is pretty much the link between the national and the parish through our regional coordinator. Now, Jamaica has 4 regions, of which Clarendon is a part of the southern region, which the other parishes are Manchester and St. Elizabeth, and our regional coordinator is Mrs. Camille Beckford Palmer. Now she bridges the national to the parish, which the parish has the Parish Disaster Committee, and that Parish Disaster Committee now would pretty much do the essentials, have the functionaries, and the talk and the link into the parish, to the national, sorry. Then we have the community. Now, it's not necessarily that it is at bottom, the community is at the bottom of the tier, but it is that the community members through the CERTs, or what we call the Community Disaster Risk Management groups, or their associations, or whatever groups they have, they are pretty much the eyes and ears and the feet of the whole framework. And whatever happens at the community level, they would feed it into the parish, which we would feed it into the national through the regional. So that's pretty much the essence of it.
All right.
Now I spoke about the national level of being the National Disaster Risk Management Council, and I spoke about the Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister, being the chairman of that council. Now, on June 1 or before June, the hurricane season, you will hear that the Management Council will be meeting, and usually you will hear or see his deputy, who is the Minister for Local Government and Rural Development, and that is the parent ministry for disaster management. Then you have the national coordinator, which is the Director General of the ODPEM, or as I would say, the functionary, which would be the ODPEM, right? So they make sure that everything is done, right? And then that next it filters into the different committees of that council. Now there are 7 committees of council at the national level. They are pretty much administration and finance, which is headed by the finance ministry. Then you have recovery and planning, which is headed by the PIOJ. You have also prevention and mitigation, which is headed or led by the ODPEM. You have emergency operations, and that's led by the Jamaica Fire Brigade. Of course, there is the health and planning, which is headed by the or led by the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Then you have public information and education, and of course, the Jamaica Information Service is one that leads that committee. And last but not least, the humanitarian that deals with the welfare and social support, and that is led by the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, MLSS.
All right. Really a joint up initiative.
Yes.
Right. Let's take it to the parish level.
Now, before I go to the parish level, I must say quickly that the national framework or national disaster management is pretty much guided by an act, the National Disaster Act of 2015. Now, I like to say that that act is pretty much our Bible or a guideline as to how we operate. All right. Now, the nation or the parish pretty much reflects that of the national. So just like how the national has a council, we have what is called our committee. And that's the Parish Disaster Committee that is headed by the Honorable, well, the Mayor, His Worship the Mayor, and co-chaired by the Custos Rotolorium. Of course, that filters into the Parish Disaster Coordinator, who is pretty much the functionary of the Parish Disaster Committee, and it goes to the Emergency Operations Center and to 3 subcommittees. All that information that is discussed at the Parish Disaster Committee, which, by the way, we have meetings every third Thursday in the month, except August, matters of mitigation, preparedness, response, what are the plans for the parish are discussed at that level. And of course, that information will feed into the national, which of course we know ODPEM is the national coordinating body.
Awesome. The Emergency
So,
Operations Center.
all right, so a little about the Parish Emergency Operations Center. It is pretty much the hub of all operations, emergency operations, where we have all the information, all the data coming in to the PEOC, Parish Emergency Operations Center. So it's a centralized location of emergency response and recovery support, and all decisions, emergency decisions, are made right there. So it's a buzz room pretty much. Now, our Parish Emergency Operations Center is located at 3 Sems Road, that is the administrative building of the Clarendon Municipal Corporation. And all entities, so that would make up some of the membership of the Parish Disaster Committee. We have staffing from the Municipal Corporation, as like the Roads and Works Department, Poor Relief, the councillors, administration, and of course other entities, outside entities such as the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the Jamaica Fire Brigade, Health Department, police, Red Cross, everybody just will come at the emergency operations center and provide their or give their support and do the necessaries in terms of getting the information and acting on that information as quickly as possible.
All right. Amazing. Anne-Marie says she's enjoying this civics general knowledge lesson. Welcome, Janice Bull, Jen White, Zepod, Shakira. Thank you for joining us. All right. I trust you're taking notes. Anne-Marie seems to be taking copious notes. Awesome. All right. So let's go into the whole matter of the hazards, because when I think of disaster, the first thing that usually comes to mind is hurricane and flooding, especially for Clarendon.
Mhm.
But there are really much more than just hurricane and flooding for Clarendon, right? So take
Most
us,
definitely.
yes.
Most definitely. So Clarendon is arguably one of the most vulnerable parish in the country. And it's all because of its terrain. And it's all because of Upper Clarendon is pretty much hilly and it has a lot of, well, it's gifted for a lot of landslides and um, especially if you have intense rain, it has also flooding. And then you have the lower or the southern section of the parish, which is pretty much the bare plains. And of course, we see the Ryomino just extending to the bare plains or to the southern end of the parish. So we recognize that um, with its assets, Clarendon tends to have a lot of vulnerabilities, right? And of course, our population too. So we have approximately 250,000 persons, but they are mixed population. We have of different socioeconomic group. We have persons with vulnerabilities too. So it's a mixture that causes Clarendon to have kind of high level of vulnerability. Notwithstanding, we have our different hazards that we should definitely make sure that we are aware of or knowledgeable of. And if you go to the next slide, we'll discuss some of these hazards. Now, of course, you talked about, Ms. Witter, we are aware of hurricanes and floods,
Top
but
of the list,
many
right?
times, definitely, but many of the times we tend to overlook earthquakes. And even though we are in the hurricane season, we have actually had reports of earthquakes happening during the hurricane season. So earthquakes are something that doesn't have any time frame. It can happen at any time. All right. Drought too is another hazard that we have to make sure that we are very much knowledgeable of. I spoke a little about landslides, especially affecting the upper part of Clarendon. Tsunami, a secondary hazard of earthquake, is something that we need to also be very conscious of. And of course, we have man-made hazards such as civil unrest, fires, chemical spills. And yes, from 2020, Clarendon and Jamaica on the whole, we have been learning and experiencing, adapting, if I may, about the pandemic, COVID-19. So we have to be adjusting and readjusting our lifestyle to live within that pandemic. So those are some of the hazards that affect Ireland.
All right, great. So before we go into the other aspect of the discussion, let's take a little break here and hear from.
In case of an earthquake and the place start shaking, shaking. Drop, cover, then hold on. Drop, cover, and hold on. In case of an earthquake, there's a few tips that can keep you from harm. In case of an earthquake, you gotta stay calm. Move away from doors, windows, and things that can fall. Try not to use steps or elevators at all. Drop, protect your head on your face. Don't go running all over the place. Cover under a bed or a table, against a wall that's firm and stable. Hold on, you must hold on. Don't panic, stay calm. Don't move until the shaking stops. Here it is. Drop, cover, and hold on. Drop, cover, and hold on. In case of an earthquake. Drop, cover, and hold on.
Learn how to protect yourself during an earthquake. Log on to weready.org. That's weready.org for more information.
All right. And that jingle was brought to you by the Office of the Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM. All right. So let's take an, another dive into preparedness activities. What have you and the team been up to in Clarendon in terms of activities?
Bitter. I must say that jingle has a nice little rock to it. I hope everybody was rocking to it. So, all right. So, in terms of preparedness activities, the team and I have been pretty much on the road in schools, different communities, selling the preparedness message of be prepared. All right. And this is for all hazards, whether it be hurricanes, earthquakes, tsunami. So if you notice in the pictures shown there that the our regional coordinator, Mrs. Camille Bedford Palmer, is engaging groups or Rocky Point in one of the hazards as to how to best prepare themselves. We also do one-on-one engagements, and you will notice that I was on the beach, and that would be doing a tsunami one-on-one talk with the residents, fishermen folks about how to better protect themselves in the event of an earthquake slash tsunami. And the picture to my right, the team would be in Union Town doing a walkthrough talking about earthquake preparedness. So preparedness, those are just some of the preparedness activities that we would have been engaged in the parish. We like to go face to face to make sure that the message is not only direct but personalized, and first we can hear from the ground, what is their take as to how to really be prepared. We
Right.
also have done we have also have engaged with projects from the Parish Development Committee and Benevolent Society in terms of and the OPEM in terms of signs. Now I'll start with the sign on my right hand side. Be flood smart. So a project that was engaged last year, we were able to have about three of those signs up. Well, one flood smart, and that's in Crooked River. And then we have a drought water conservation sign in Mount Airy, and another one in Crooked River being landslide safety. And I noticed that signs are a very efficient way to be constant reminders and as to remind the community about, be in a preparedness state. And of course, the picture to the left, we talk about tsunami activities. So Mrs. Camille Beckford Palmer and a resident, they are, posing at one of the signs evacuation route, which we have actually tried to do in the Fawker community, Fawker Beach community.
Okay. And if we're talking about community, it goes without saying that you have some volunteers in your community that you work with. So let's talk about the volunteerism aspect.
All right. Now, as I said earlier in the broadcast, that our community members or CDRM groups, community disaster risk management groups, they are pretty much the first responders or the the advocates for the community in disaster management. So they're their eyes or ears or feet or hands. Now, volunteerism is very, very important, and without them, we could not have a very strong disaster management team in the parish. So I want to quickly applaud and say thank you to all our volunteers in the parish and beyond. Now, we have recognized that, well, there's in excess of about 13 CDRM teams in the parish, and we try to engage them a lot by doing drills and trainings and having some meetings with them. A particular activity that was done, as you see in our slide, for Rocky Point Community Center, they did an earthquake tsunami drill at the beach. So they got themselves dressed up, and we tried to have them in vests and equip them with some basic resources so that they don't go empty-handed to do the work, right? So they are equipped, and we recognized that they were ready and waiting to participate in a drill. We recognize also in the picture in the middle, Thompson Town community members, they were pretty much administering first aid, which who they are trained in first aid management, um, to the students who were injured in that earthquake drill activity. And I spoke about the Mount Airy community who they and the signs that we put up there last year. The picture at the top, I found that quite interesting, and even though that happened many years ago, it's very relevant because we tend to wait. We tend to want to wait on outside to come into the community to help when we of ourselves can put our hands and our resources together and help the community. So Bog Hole they built a raft and they were able to help to transport residents from one area to the other using that raft. So that was quite commendable of them.
Indeed.
So volunteerism is very important, and I, as I said earlier, I applaud them and I ask that they continue the good work.
All right. Let's talk about resourcing of communities because, of course, they can't do it on their own.
No, indeed they cannot, and we recognize that resources are very limited. So I don't want some communities to say why they get it, and but as much as possible, we try our best to see how we can equip the communities. And Mount Airy and Crooked River, so the picture on my far left and far right, they were able, through a project from UNDP, administered by the Parish Development Committee, they were able to be equipped with certain basic resources, and the shelter too was able to benefit from some of these resources. I must quickly say too that the ODPEM as well as the ministry and the municipal corporation to have upgraded some of our shelters and equipped some of these communities too. So some of the upgrading of some communities also that have benefited would be like the Portland Cottage community, as well as the school in Sandy River known as Stacyville Primary School. We have also been able to put in portable containers in Frankfield and Kellett, so that whenever any eventualities happen and we're able to I cannot reach to those communities, at least they would have been stocked, or some resources would have been stocked, and the key persons would be able to access and distribute accordingly. Another thing, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to go back to the slide, is that we tend to also give small resources, and this one is from Uppbeat, where we try to have a emergency team equipped for them to respond in the event of a tsunami. Right, so we gave them bullhorns and some of the basic resources so that they can be able to be self-sufficient.
All right. So before we go into drills and simulation, let's take another jingle from ODPEM.
So you think it's all about sport? Running can save your life. Say you're at the beach having a good time and feel a strong shaking. Run. See the water withdraw an unusual distance from the shore. Run. Hear a strange roar. Run. If you experience any of these warning signs, run to higher ground. There may not be enough time for an official tsunami warning. Be tsunami smart. Know the natural warning signs. Are you ready?
Visit weready.org, brought to you by SEDIMA and the European Union.
All right, let me pause to acknowledge Avril Crawford, who is joining to support Eleanor, the best person to tell you all about disaster preparedness. And we also have with us Sophia Mitchell, who is the Acting Senior Director of Preparedness and Emergency Operations there at ODPEM. Thank you for joining us, ladies. It's great to have you. All right. Love it. So let's get into the key preparedness. Let's tell us how we're gonna do the in terms of the drills and simulation exercises. Talk us through.
All right, so drills are very, very important. They are not only practice sessions, but they pretty much highlight the gaps into our plans if we have one, and I encourage you to have plans so that we know what to do in the event of a fire or an earthquake or hurricane, whatever the case may be. I will start with the picture on my left, where we just came out of a hurricane jingle or earthquake jingle, sorry. So we recognize that students are demonstrating the drop cover hold method for an earthquake. Now we recognize now that earthquakes happen at any time, and because earthquakes happen at any time, we ought to be prepared. So many times we get into the schools, community places, and organizations as well, and we teach these persons that it is important to get under a sturdy piece of furniture, ensure that the body is totally covered, and hold on. Wait until the shaking stops, and then when it is appropriate, you go or you exit or evacuate the building as quickly or briskly as possible. So, the students, very good actors, they tend to demonstrate and love that activity as well. Onto my left, we recognize a team from the Rocky Point, and feature them a lot because this happened in early February, where they were able to participate in the earthquake/tsunami community exercise. Now, tsunami is not really talked about much, but of course, it is definitely a part of a hazard that we should definitely know. And one of the safety tips for hazards, for tsunami rather, is that you should try to go as high as possible or far inland. Now, one of the characteristics of Rocky Point is that it is very flat. And so there's not a hill, unlike Falker, that they can go up. So it was quite important for us to test the evacuation procedure and see how quickly they could move from the beach to the safe spot in quotation, which is at the community center. So we see that demonstrating there.
All right. Before we move on, can we do that protective covering before we move on?
Definitely. So if you are inside, and it is important to do a hazard hunt at your home, at your schools, your organizations. So look to see where are the different hazards, anything that can cause, or bundles, anything that can cause potential harm. So if you look for the fans in the roof, or if your desk can be a bit cluttered, it's good to kind of declutter it, right? So that in the event of a sudden shaking, you're able to respond. Go quickly underneath the table, ensure that your entire body is covered, and hold on to the legs of the table. Now, let's say that you're outside. If you are outside, it is important that you respond by putting a hand or whatever you have that can cover your head. One hand on your head, the other to your neck. Ensure that your elbows are covered in your face, so to protect your face, and you crouch to the floor.
All right,
ensure that
is that right?
Hand on the head, right, and you crouch. Crouch.
Okay. All right. Got it.
And then
I hope you all try that. Got to practice it.
right. And of course, it is important that once the shaking stops, you quickly evacuate or leave the building into an open space. And we want to make sure that that happens because the open space free of hazards such as light wires, trees, because we don't know if an aftershock can happen and they have the tendency of falling, and we don't want to create another but we don't want to create more injury in case of another injury. So we want to make sure that everyone is safe. We need to also look out for our neighbors, look out for your friend. Many times some of us at the workplaces or even at home, we want to go out and we don't want to tell persons where we're going. It is always safe to make sure that somebody knows, so that in the event of anything, somebody can say that yes, we know the location of this person. All right. I also want to say that it is important for us to have a plan, a family plan, a personal plan, not only of our workplace have a plan or a parish, but then it is always important for us to know what to do in the event of an earthquake or a flood or a hurricane, have safety areas that we need to go, right? And of course, it's not uncool to have drills and these talks at home. Have these practice sessions, in case of a fire or so, because it is important for everybody to know what to do. And that's why we have these drills and simulation exercises on all levels, right? And you're seeing on screen back at Falker Beach, the babies, students from the Falker Beach Basic School and their staff and parents engaging in the tsunami evacuation exercise where they ran up round hill and they assembled at the assembly area. Yeah.
All right. And before all of these training, the drills and simulation, you have to train your volunteers, correct?
Most definitely. And the trainings each year, each year we try to engage in a lot of training for our volunteers and for the community at large. So we try to have shelter and shelter management training. That training was in 2020 where we engaged in the pandemic and we had to relearn certain things. So um, wearing of masks, which now has become like a norm for us, we had to make sure that certainly the shelter managers were knew how to do shelter management during a pandemic. So they are trained in shelter and shelter management. They're trained in initial damage assessment because after an incident, assessment has to be done as to the different levels of damage that the community may experience. And of course, communities are engaged in hazard mapping and vulnerability assessment, along with other type of training that's done by other entities in collaboration with other entities, like how to use a fire extinguisher, and that's done by the fire brigade, and also first aid, that's done by Red Cross and other entities to give us trainings, because training is very important. It's also a part of the preparedness package, and it is also it helps us to expand the knowledge. Ms. Witter?
We are back.
Okay, great.
There seem to be some interference. These are some of the things that happens during this time of the year. So we lost the power for a little while, but back up.
I'm not hearing you.
Are you hearing me?
I'm hardly hearing you, no, Miss Witter. I'm not hearing.
Go ahead and continue sharing the
Okay.
training.
All right, not a problem. So I was saying, I don't know where you left off, but or you weren't hearing me, but I was saying to you that training, some of the training, other trainings that we do in collaboration with other entities such as the fire brigade and the Red Cross in terms of knowing how to use fire extinguishers, first aid, and CPR training. So these are just basic training things that we would have engaged in or engage community members and or volunteers so that they are able to, be more prepared. Um, Also, as basic disaster risk management, what are knowing the difference in the terminologies, what's hazard versus what's a disaster, what are the risks, the vulnerabilities. So those are just simple basic trainings that we do or provide to the various groups and communities.
All right, great. I trust you're hearing me clearly now.
Most definitely, yes.
All right, great. So let's get into the general preparedness tips.
All right. Now, I talked about general preparedness tips because it was kind of hard to, or it would be a lot of time to break down for earthquake, hurricanes, and the other hazards. So
Right.
it is important that we just, when we're talking disaster risk management, or we're just having general conversation, it's important that we know these tips, writing our plans, having the different conversations, as I said. So you know about your environment. If you live in a low-lying area, know that you're at risk to flooding. If you live in the hills, know that you can be at risk to landslides or rock falls. So know about your location, know about your environment, know about the ins and outs in terms of is it a one way in, one way out? How do I get out in the event? Make sure that you have alternate locations. So in the event that you're not able to get back into your home or into your community because of a flood or so on, what would be that safe location that the family would know to go or to contact? Is it the police station or is it um, a close family friend or a relative? It is very important that you know that. Of course, it is important that you stock up on certain items too, such as, and we know the water, food items, batteries in the event of a pandemic, well, COVID-19 now, so we have to stock up more on our masks and sanitizers and cleaning agents. Um, we have to also ensure that we know um, where our documents are and what to do in the event um, of us, being trapped. If you could go back to the next slide, Miss Witter, please. Thank you very much. Um,
That is good.
it is also important that you know where your shelter is. Now, your shelter can be a close family or friend, or it can be a designated shelter. Now, Clarendon has 95 designated shelters across the parish, and they are equipped with at least two shelter managers per shelter and nearly approximately 200 shelter managers across the parish. So we have pretty much in disaster management at the parish level equipped these persons as best as possible to serve you. Now, if so, it's good for you to know where your shelter is. All right. and not only to know where your shelter is, but know your emergency numbers. And emergency numbers not only means the parish disaster coordinator or the police or the fire brigade, but know persons with skill sets in your community who are able to help you. If you go to the next slide, it is also important that you make that plan, ensure that you have your top-up cards. We talked about the food already, and basic supplies such as your lights and your batteries, your COVID-19 supplies. Ensure that you also try to have plastics and tapes so that you can keep these things dry. You don't know what can happen when you're transporting to other areas. So ensure that you try to have a plan within a plan, per se. And also try to ensure that you listen to credible sources. Now, the source that you will get information from would be pretty much the Met Office, the ODPEM, as well as the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. So don't take it that you hear about a storm coming tomorrow and it's not from a credible source, right? It is always important that you listen to your devices and to credible organizations. So that's pretty. Oh, and pretty much, I can't overemphasize, Ms. Witter and the team, that it is important that you communicate your plan to your family members. Let everybody know. So if you're live on a farm, ensure you know what you're going to do with your pets. If you have persons with disabilities, know how to properly care and treat for them. And if you live in low-lying areas, please, don't wait until it gets into danger zone, but try to evacuate or try to move away and go to higher ground as best as possible. So those are just general tips.
Those are the general tips. And with that being said,
People, are you listening?
If you choose to remain at home after an evacuation order has been issued, you do so at your own risk.
Get down, get down! Heed the warning.
that's right.
People, are you listening?
If you choose to remain at home after an evacuation order has been issued, you do so at your own risk.
Get down, get down! Heed the warning.
All right, you've heard it. Heed the warnings. All right. So some really great information here. And Sir Mackenzie, very good information. Thanks for joining us, Sir Mackenzie. Always great to have you here. Right. So just in case you missed the first part, Mrs. Coombs-Waite would have shared a vast array of information as it relates to disaster preparedness. So you want to go back, take note of the different areas so that you can be prepared. Thank you. And Francis says she loves it. It's very informative. That's what we do here on the Serenity Resource Connector. So we connect with the Municipal Corporation there in Clarendon on 4th Thursdays to have we are focusing now on, this is about the 4th area of the Municipal Corporation, and we'll be doing another area until the end of 2022. Thanks to the team for making themselves available to share the information, what it is that they do, how they're serving in the parish of Clarendon, how you can engage them, and who exactly to reach out to for what. But we cannot close before we actually share, Mrs. Coombs-Waite, in the event of, say, a fire. What is the plan in the parish itself in terms of getting support through the parish coordinator or the parish, the system in the parish, as a matter of fact?
All right. So in the event of a fire, we have our shelter welfare subcommittee that would pretty much be put in place. So they we collaborate with the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the Poor Relief, the Red Cross, and other agencies so that they can try to gather as much resources as possible to assist those fire victims. It is important that the fire victims have their fire report so that we can verify that the fire is there. We may go and do verification on site, you know, and we also would like, well, we ask, where would they stay? So maybe they have family or friends who can put them up, and we try to give them some just basic resources such as clothing, food, once possible, mattress, and some just basic items so that they can just try to bounce on their feet or get back as quickly as possible. So we tend to ask them to come to my office where I'll try to coordinate to get the help from the various agencies so that they can, be a little bit more comfortable.
All right. And your office is at 37th Road there in Maypen?
I am located on 1 Brooks Avenue,
Oh, you're at the
Maypen,
Avenue.
Roads and
Oh,
North
okay.
Department. Right.
All right. I believe a number of people know that location as the Poor Relief location.
Yes, yes.
I think that's what a number of people in Maypen refer to it as, the Poor Relief
Yes.
area.
Or
All
on,
right.
or on the fire station road. Yes.
All right, I love this. And Francis is asking, how can citizens donate to the corporation to assist persons affected by the various disasters?
All right. So it is always best to write a letter to the municipal corporation stating that you would like to donate and some of the things that you would like to donate. And of course, from there, we would try to facilitate. So we do appreciate and thank for the donation. However, it's best to write to the corporation, state the items, and then we can take it.
Right, and you write to the CEO, that's Mr. Rowan Blake, and
Yes.
he's located at the 37th Road location.
Correct. Yes.
All right, and as we are on that note, let me share there is a fire victim in Longville Park. So let me share this. So if there are persons who are able to assist, they can do so. All right, what's going on with let me get this.
Ms. Rita, if I can come in there, I must applaud the community members of the Longville Park, in Longville Park, for being so caring and so quick in responding to that fire. They had their meetings and they have rallied a lot of support for this particular person. And I must say that is good spirit of volunteerism as well as disaster risk management teamwork. So I applaud them.
Awesome. Great job, Longville Park. And I am seeking to get that flyer up so that others can support. There we go. All right. So I trust you're able to see, at least you should be able to see the contact information. So you can take note of that. And if you're able to support, please go ahead and do so. Here's a community that is rallying around their neighbors. They're being good neighbors. They're helping their neighbor to bounce back from this fire. All right. So you can just go back, pause the video on YouTube when we're through here to get the additional information and show your support where you're able to. All right. Which brings us to our final thoughts for this episode, Lady Coombs with. What do you want to leave with the viewers?
Whole plate full. Preparedness is key. Preparedness is key. Do not take anything for granted. Do not take anyone for granted. Being prepared is definitely paramount. We want to make sure that you practice your drills, have that talk at the dinner table, while going home, wherever you are. Make sure that you make that preparedness activity, that disaster risk management, a part of your lifestyle. Want to also thank our volunteers and all the agencies that make up the disaster risk management group, because without you, disaster risk management cannot function as it ought to be. So let's just remember that we need to plan, prepare, and be resilient. All right? That's it.
All right. I trust we all got that. All right. I was seeking to put up your full title, but just to remind you, Mrs. Eleanor Coombs-Waite is the Parish Disaster Coordinator for Clarendon. All right. Excellent job, Mrs. Waite, getting the parish aware and prepared. That's from N. Francis. All right. Beautiful.
Thank
I
you,
love it
friend.
yes, I love it when the team mates come in and support. Very good look. All right, so let me thank you all for taking the time to connect with us here on the Serenity Resource Connector for another episode of Local Governance and Community Development, looking at disaster preparedness. And you want to stay tuned for what's coming up next in this series and the others. There's a schedule that is up on the YouTube page as to what we do each week here. So first Thursdays, it is Culture Corner with the JCDC. Second Thursdays, it is conversation with the Clarendon Police Division on community safety and security. Third Thursdays, we engage with the Early Childhood Commission on the Year of Early Childhood Development. And then we reconnect with the Clarendon Municipal Corporation, fourth Thursday. And in September, we have a fifth Thursday, and the fifth Thursday is dedicated to the youth leaders in Clarendon, that we hear about what they're doing and how they're supporting the different community groups. Thanks for joining, Jen White, Camille Wright. Thank you so much. And you continue to stay safe until next time when we do this again here on the Serenity Resource Connector. God bless.